Hello, everyone. This is Jason White, and welcome to the fifth ISO podcast. And last time we were together, we were talking about the 1986 F1 mod, which is very much anticipated for next series. Today, we're going to be talking about the USAC 1978 championship cars and the mod that we're going to be running next year for 18 rounds, a very lengthy schedule and a very challenging one. Joining me to talk about this mod, Alberto Ibañez. Alberto, always good to talk to you.
Thank you, Jason. Hello, everybody. Pleased to come here to talk about this mod. Jason, really, this is one of our favorites, I think.
Oh, yeah. I don't think it's any secret that this is something we love very much. Oval racing and just the unique character that it has. And it's really fun, too, to bring it to an audience that doesn't necessarily know about it, which actually is kind of an interesting parallel when you take a look at what the 1978 series was and how it unfolded. But we're just finishing up 74 right now in our 2020 season, and we're going to be jumping forward 4 years to 1978. So let's start with a very obvious question a lot of people have. Why did we pick 1978? And the answer really is that Sabre happened to be working on it.
It's a very funny thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that everybody will love to hear about this because it's not the first time that it actually happens. Because when you're blessed with someone as ultra creative as David Sabre is in your team, this kind of thing happen. And I think you know also very well because you are used to being creative teams. But I think the funny thing about this is one day we were like working there in our private forum. We were having a good time there, planning and doing work and that. And all of a sudden, David Sabre comes and says something like, "Oh, I just happened to remember that a long time ago, the USAC came actually here to the United Kingdom to race, and they were here in Brances and Silverstone. So I thought, why not? I would just do that." And bang, he shows a picture of that beautiful Eagle 78. And from then on, it was like one model after another because he's really tireless in that. And bam, 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 he started pumping out models. And before you know it, there you go. We had a USAC 78 mod on the works.
Yeah, David's ability to crank out models is amazing. Not only models that look good, but models that are very polygon efficient, that meet the criteria that you need to make a successful mod for AMS or any other engine. And we're really blessed to have him as a creative partner because, once he sets about doing something, it's just like he's like a machine. He just cranks it out like you wouldn't believe. So, it'd be tempting to think, well, 4 years, how much can change in 4 years? Well, a lot did in USAC. And those of you who know a thing or two about IndyCar racing in the States will know that 1978 was the year just before the infamous CART USAC split, which had been brewing for a while. They didn't just up and suddenly decide to split. These were difficulties and differences of opinion that were happening between the owners and United States Auto Club that had been going on for a while. But that doesn't mean that this last year of USAC competition at this level was not exceptional in any way. There were a lot of really interesting things going on. So the rules in a nutshell, I mean, there are a lot of similar things to 74, but there were probably very specific things about 78 that make this series unique, right?
Yeah. One thing that was also very interesting was once David Sabre had done all this work and we started like researching the mod, as you have said, well, we basically knew about that year, 78, all the things that people do remember, and that's all the soreness, the split. It was about to start a new series that was the CART. At the time, it was an unknown factor. Everybody was like unhappy with the USAC and all that. That's what everybody remembers. But then when you start digging in, you find out there were many interesting things. We have already said it in the presentation of the mod. It was the year that the Cosworth started becoming really a factor in USAC racing. It was an engine that had a history already in Formula One, but someone had the brilliant idea to turbocharge it, which is basically what had happened with the Offenhauser some years ago. And then that engine suddenly entered the scene. And the rules started, as usual, to have to adapt to those novelties, to those dominant engines that were coming in. And what happened here was that USAC officers, they were basically, well, the USAC staff actually, they were faced with a bit of a situation where they were not really knowing which way to go. It was a time of a turmoil. It's no wonder that people got upset because they had that dominant Offenhauser engine that was a brilliant design, and that they knew with unlimited boost that thing was absolutely going to clean the field. They were going to do anything they wanted because it could pump nearly unlimited amounts of power, and they had seen that in previous years. So first of all, they were scared with the power that those engines could put up. And now that the V8 was coming in, that the Cosworth was doing for the first time something that they had not probably expected that anybody could do, that there was to challenge the Offenhauser. It was like they were thinking, oh, that's the future, let's follow this route. And they started capping the Offenhauser with more and more and more limiting rules. So as I've already said, the Offenhauser is a great engine as long as there are no rules, as long
Yeah.
as you can unlimitedly turbocharge it and you can waste as much fuel as you want. But we were in the 70s. That was the time of the oil crisis that everybody remembers, the one that basically finished it off the pony cars and the muscle cars.
Yeah.
And they were still in the wake of that. So basically, what was going on here was that USAC, scared of the speed, scared of the public image that they were giving with all that unlimited fuel consumption, they have started, and we have already experienced that in the 74 that we're running now, they started already capping the fuel. They
Hmm.
started already capping the boost, and there was an inches of mercury. That's an American measurement unit. They started capping that in the qualifying, but not in the race. In the race, it was the fuel actually that was putting a limit to what you could do. And with all that, they had been basically killing the Offenhauser engine. When the Cosworth came in, all of a sudden you get an engine in this thing that could do all those things that the Offenhauser did on that low boost much better. And so there was all of a sudden a very strong competitor, but with a caveat. It was a very expensive engine. It
Hmm.
was an engine that not everybody could get. And this started shifting what had been so far the famous USAC championship and the crown of the jewel that was the Indy 500. It had become a race that went from the shade tree mechanic and from the enthusiast that could basically buy an Offenhauser and cobble together a chassis in the backyard of his house. All of a sudden it became very professional. There were already teams that were like starting to become really professional. So far you only had the top ones like McLaren, Pat Patrick, and all American racers. But now everybody was going to have to step up their game really big time, because with that Cosworth engine, if you wanted to be competitive, you needed that engine. And if you needed that engine, you really needed deep pockets to get it.
One of the nice things about 1978, as far as a research end for us, is that the amount of video that's available on 1978 is far better than 1974 or 73 was. And there's a really simple reason for that. It was the first year that home VHS recording really started to take off, especially in the States. And so you have a lot of people with the broadcasts of these races on their home
Mhm.
videotapes. So we have reference of basically every race except for maybe one or two, which is fantastic. So we have a lot of video evidence to go with the research that we usually do, which has been fun.
Yeah, because to have really authentic sources is very important when you're doing this, because it's not about modeling the cars as you see them nowadays in museums or as you see them in those concours d'elegance, like the Amelia concours d'elegance, where many of these cars display regularly,
Yeah.
or maybe even at Goodwood. No, it's how those cars actually drove when they were
Hmm.
there back in the late 70s. And you can see that, you can tell that very well when you see real footage, obviously.
Hmm. So, I mean, the good news about creating this mod was that we did have a foundation to work with. I mean, obviously, some of the cars are the same basic construction as the 1974 and 73. Like there's some cars that we were able to take a lot of parts from or whole tubs from just as a basis. I'm talking about the Coyote, the Eagle chassis. There were some other instances, but there are also some parts and pieces that David was able to pillage from those two mods to make his life a lot easier. That's not to say they didn't have to build some cars from scratch. The McLaren M24 and a lot of other cars, the Penske PC6. These are cars that needed to be built from zero, and I think everybody's going to be really thrilled when they see the work that David put into these, because they look fantastic. So
Yeah, I think you can safely say that about like 25% of the mod was actually recycled. But
yeah.
then again, that's exactly how it worked in real life, because
Hmm.
even in 78 and after all the big crisis, the oil crisis of 73, you actually had in the USAC Championship Trail many of the old cars from the 74 still being used in the tracks, still lingering around with whatever updates they could cobble together. That's one of the interesting design traits. I've been looking recently through the entry list when doing physics work and that, and I saw there, for example, an Eagle 74 that was actually looking like anything except an Eagle 74 because they were modernized. Everybody was being creative about it because the 74 that we are running this year is actually the last year that Dan Gurney put up a new car until 78. I mean, they spent basically 4 years using the same car with updates.
Hmm. Yeah. The other thing that people will notice when they look at these cars is that they all start to have the same general shape to them in a plan view. They start to look similar in shape to what you would expect of Bob Riley's cars, like the Coyote and other cars that he did during the 1970s. They start to have this very dramatic V wedge towards the front, and a lot of that reflects, the fuel capacity that had been cut down. The previous like Eagle with a very wide tub. That was a car that was designed to carry 80 gallons of fuel. Obviously, we're not doing that anymore, so the shape of the car can change to accommodate a smaller fuel load. So these brand new cars are all reacting to that in terms of proportion. So that's one reason that the size of them changes. But they're also trying to get the smallest, footprint in the front that they can to cut through the air as effectively as possible. And the,
It,
the other thing that's interesting about this too, sorry, we start to get into the situation where American built chassis are in a kind of a decline, except for, I mean, the Parnelli chassis is particularly good, but there's a lot more cars coming from England in this situation, I would think. Is that an accurate statement or no?
yes, I mean, the interesting thing about 78 is that there was a bit of a conversion of a converging process between Formula One and USAC. It all had started some years earlier when McLaren started racing in USAC, when they brought the M16A. And then in later years, they were basically doing adaptations of the Formula One car that they designed to USAC racing. And that got many people thinking because they were thinking, first of all, we are doing here basically oval racing, and then we know what our priorities is in terms of design and suspension and all that. But then again, I mean, McLaren has proven us that a good base of a road racing car, even a competitive car in Formula One, can actually be very good at ovals. So basically, that got many people in USAC thinking. Not just Dan Gurney with the and Roman Slobotinsky with the design of the Eagles, but also many others. So what happens here is that Parnelli, for example, as you all know, got a Formula One team actually in the 70s.
Yeah, he
They
did.
were doing, yes, Formula 5000s. They were doing
Hmm.
other road racing cars like the Formula Ones. And then again, Penske, for example, also did the same thing. Penske had a Formula One team in the mid 70s. You all know
Hmm.
uh, Mark Donohue was actually injured and died because of a crash in 1975 in one of the
Yeah.
Formula Ones that Penske was developing. So there was a lot of cross design between both worlds. And that reflects in something that this year was beginning to happen in USAC. They were returning to road racing. After several years that they had only been doing ovals, all of a sudden you got Motorsport in the schedule, and all of a sudden you got that funny British leg where they were coming to Europe to show the people what the USAC trial was about, and they were going to race at Brands Hatch and at Silverstone.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because you see all those cars racing in the videos, the footage that you've mentioned before, and my God, they were pretty good at road racing. It was quite interesting to see that because so far you got only cars that had been basically designed for oval racing.
Yeah, it's interesting how IndyCar racing has changed over the years. Like, it's gone away from road racing and then kind of, I mean, obviously Watson Roadsters were designed to turn left. That's what they're for. If you go to the museum in Indiana and look at these cars, they are not symmetrical at all.
That's
They
correct.
are clearly the ultimate expression of what starts at the sprint car level and then gets up to what back then they called the big cars. But yeah, clearly racing was getting to a point where road racing and oval racing were kind of coalescing, and a lot of the cottage industry work that went on in England was making sense to be applied to oval racing as well. And of course, that set the stage later on for kart, which very much split between oval and road racing. So, uh, but in any case, yeah, I'm curious about that too. Now that we're on the subject of that trip that the USAC brigade made over to England, in the research that you were doing, Alberto, what was the real point of doing that? What was USAC trying to accomplish?
I think that they were basically trying to get more audience, because remember, these were the years when the television audiences were starting to get up to really explode, and
Yeah.
all the marketing, the publicity, and the big names of everything. Not yet the tobacco in USAC, but they were coming. All the sponsors were trying to get visibility, and basically what USAC was trying to do here was like to silence some of the critics that they were having, all the internal turmoil, by expanding to other markets and by trying to make it clear that this was a first level World Series. So it was a decision from the USAC staff, actually. And it's very interesting because our research revealed that it was such a one sided decision that it actually upset a lot some of the teams, and it upset a lot Goodyear, because Goodyear was the sole tire provider, and they didn't know at the start of the season that something like that was going to happen, that the USAC was going to extend it to even 2 races more. And then they found themselves in the worst situation that they had a contract with the teams to supply the tires for the whole season, and all of a sudden the season was 2 races longer without even having been consulted. So that's something else that didn't go down well. But I think that also reflects how desperate the USAC staff was back then.
It's interesting that that was a dynamic that existed too. You mentioned that Goodyear was the lone tire supplier, which will make things a little simpler for everybody because in '74, there were still Firestone and Goodyear. But
Yeah.
the now, as far as we mentioned, of course, that the cars, at this era, they have a lot more in common with road racing cars than they used to, the oval cars. So now it's a question of, if we're going over to England and we're driving, which, to be fair, were actually pretty simple courses overall, like Silverstone, and I guess the complicated thing about Brands Hatch is the elevation change. But what did they have to do to make these cars able to traverse a road course?
Well, the thing is that the base, the foundation of these cars was already symmetric. That happened already at the beginning of the 70s, because they realized that when you have one of these cars, open wheel cars, the suspension has enough leeway to set them up so that even if you create them symmetrical, they can race later at ovals being completely asymmetrical by playing a bit with all that. But in the case of these cars, like I said, they were already racing at Mosport, for example, and they were already probably conceived with that idea in mind. So what you do basically is you change in the suspension arms, the roll fenders, and things like that, because you want the suspension to work in a different manner. When you're only turning left and when you're doing huge speeds, like you're doing in the ovals, even the shortest ovals have really huge speeds
Hmm.
compared with a road course, you don't have to worry that much, for example, about traction. What you want is the car goes smoothly through the corner as quick as possible, and then that you are very aerodynamic on the straights. In road courses, that's not the case. In road courses, you're going to throw as much downforce as you can, and what you want is a car that behaves very well, that has a lot of traction. So the shape to start with was similar to the Formula One cars of the era. And the main difference with these cars is they were way bulkier, they were way heavier than a Formula One at the time, which is something that is required because of the safety and of the stiffness of the chassis that is needed for the incredible G forces that happen in ovals.
Hmm.
But other than that, you can set them up, yes, and you can race there. The main problem that they were finding, and that's the challenge that our drivers will be facing, comes from the propulsion and the transmission, because you still have that huge turbocharged engine there on the rear, something that is even on the lowest push figures like 700 plus horsepower, but with downforce from the 70s. And then you have no other than 4 speeds in the transmission. Yes, they were using still the 4 speeds. They were not switching to a 5-speed transmission because there was none that could basically handle all the torque that was coming out from the engine. So they had to resort to the old Weissman transmission, and they were having only 4 gears, but because they had enough torque, mid-range torque, that was not that much of a problem. And in that regard, they are simpler to drive than Formula Ones. But the traction, that's the biggest problem that you have here, because you have to rig the cars for that. And it's only funny that they use those cars in tracks like Mosport and Brands Hatch Indy that are actually courses with lots of elevation changes and quite tight corners in some regard. Silverstone, that's another story. I think they will be drive fine there, but in these courses you're going to struggle with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture driving Mosport and Brands Hatch, like you say, circuits with a lot of elevation change, and having only 4 gears to play with and massive turbo lag. It's going to be really strange and a real challenge. So, but even taking the road course bit out of it, getting back to ovals, I mean, this is more of an evolutionary change than a revolutionary change from 74. People are going to find that a lot of the techniques that they developed to race 74 are still going to probably be applicable in 78, I would think. The interesting part, though, about the grip of the cars, like you'll notice too, that people are starting to understand that controlling the air under the car in a certain way will help with the grip. It started with the Coyote in 74. You can see there's a little Lexan strip that runs along the bottom. It's almost like they're trying to fence the air there in some crude fashion. But more cars are doing that in 78. So it's not ground effects, but they're certainly more aware of fencing off the sides, right, to try to get more grip in the car.
Yes, you hit the nail there because 78, remember, everybody, was the year when the famous Lotus with ground effects appeared.
Yeah.
That's the year when everything was revolutionary. Although credit needs to be given here that not only Colin Chapman was already thinking of that, of implementing that, but Jim Hall had already been experimenting with that in the Can-Am series long ago, and we would see later from 79 onwards how he came with the Chaparral IndyCar with ground effect that basically cleaned the field with Johnny Rutherford at the helm in Indianapolis. So, yeah, they were already thinking of that. They were very much aware that wings were not the only means of producing downforce. And these cars were still an evolution from 74. And surprisingly enough, there was not a huge amount more of downforce. What had happened here, what had catapulted the lap times upwards, was that they were using actually softer tires.
Mm-hmm.
They had been able, thanks to the fuel limits that USAC imposed and the limit of the amount of fuel that you can carry in the car, what has happened is that all the cars needed to stop many more times. And that means they could put softer rubber there. Because if you can stop more frequently, then why would you need to actually have very hard tires? You can as well pick softer ones and have more grip. That and the resurfacing of the Indianapolis track that happened in I think it was in 75 or 78, that alone was enough to actually make them way quicker around the speedway. So in terms of how they were in 78, it was an evolution of the same theme that had started in 74. We haven't been yet jumping to the ground effects era here in USAC, but they were actually much faster than they were before.
Yeah, the ground effects really doesn't start to take hold in IndyCar racing until 79. And even then, some people were kind of dipping their toe in the water. There's one race in particular I can think of at Michigan in 79 where Mears had the ground effect car available to him, and he would rather have raced the non-ground effect car. It was an adjustment that people were still trying to get used to, but they were very much aware uh, of that dynamic going forward. Now, the other thing we mentioned, the impact of fuel and the tire wear of having softer tires. Do you think people will be able to do the double stinting of tires, or are they too soft to do that? Would it just make more sense to just change all four when you stop?
Actually, and contradictory to one might think from what I just said a moment ago, yes, you will be able to double stint tires because there was another deficit thing that happened over these years, and that's Firestone retired from the competition. And that means that Goodyear basically was left to run along all the circuit, and that means that they didn't have any competition, and they didn't really need to go much further than they had been going before. So it was a bit of a stalling in the development of the tires in terms of the grip. By 75, 76, when Firestone actually left the competition, and Goodyear basically continued refining the tires that they had. And what they did was they increased a bit the grip, but they basically increased a lot the duration of the tires because, like I said, they had no competition. And what they wanted was to have a safe tire, a tire that people could be happy with it because there were no risk of blowing it in the middle of a stint because you had gone too much over the limit in benefit of grip and risking it too much. So, yeah, the tires were much better than in 74, but they had not been evolving a lot in terms of risky grip augmentation, but they had been basically stretching the duration of it. So they could, you would be able to double stint the tire, and in the footage that you can see in all of those races in Texas and Michigan and all that, you can see that many times they were stopping just for fuel, for the 40 gallons of fuel, but they were not doing anything with the tires. What actually will need a lot of management, however, is the fuel. That's a
Hmm.
very different story.
Yeah. I imagine that in this mod, we're going to have the ability, like we do in 74 now, to crank the boost up or turn it down in the car. So if that's the case, then yeah, it's qualifying is going to be one matter, but driving in the race and not having poor fuel economy is going to be another. It also depends on driving style too, because some people can drive on the limit with full boost, and others would rather just turn it down and go with more stability. But I think the biggest thing that I think a lot of people are going to be doing when they look at the entry list and they see all these cars, they're going to say, okay, if I pick an Offenhauser powered car, do I have a chance in hell of competing with a Cosworth? What is the 411 on that? I mean, if you pick an Offie or a DGS, which is a variant of a development of the Offenhauser, do you have a snowball's chance in hell of competing with the Cosworths?
Well, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because the Cosworth on the same fuel economy and on the same boost setting is going to be quicker than the Offenhauser. However, that doesn't mean that you don't have any chance at all. For instance, for example, in the road courses, you're not going to have that problem. So there's in actually because you have less power and the way that it's being developed in the mid range and all that, I would say that the offer houses are very pleasant to drive there. Then in the ovals, especially in the super speedways, you have more problems there because obviously the Cosworth are going to have much power. But then again, the Offenhauser will be able to keep up in the draft behind the Cosworth. And the thing that you see if you watch footage of the time was that the limit that they had was in qualifying, and then with that limit put on qualifying, obviously the Offenhausers had nothing to do against the Cosworth. But come the race, even if the Cosworth was in general a better engine, the Offenhausers had more of a chance because then they could run more boost. Yes, obviously they would be using more fuel there, but you have to account for the draft, for the driving style, as you mentioned it, and for the strategy. There could be yellows, there could be other situations where you can save fuel. And one constant thing that you see is that people were basically running a constant boost, whatever level they found out that it was paying off the best in terms of consumption versus speed. And then when they needed to overtake or when they wanted to sprint or jockey for position or do whatever they needed, they would up the boost and they would all of a sudden fly. You can see Offenhauser engine cars passing the Cosworth ones, and that depends on how much fuel you've been able to save. If there is a yellow flag that was in an ill timing for the Cosworth and you've got an Offenhauser and you did your homework and or you were much luckier, then yeah, you might have some more fuel to spare later. And you know, remember that in the case of the Indy 500 in '78, Al Unser, Big Al won that race because Tom Sniba was basically having to crank down the boost because they have miscalculated the full use. So it's going to be hairy. It's going to be not so good for the Offenhausers, but then again, it's always going to be something that is open because of anything that can happen here, as it usually does with yellow flags, accidents, and all that.
The other thing to consider too is that I would think the Offenhausers and the DGS engine would be a little more competitive on a short oval like Phoenix or Milwaukee.
Yes, with the
It
mid-range torque that they have,
Yeah.
and the because you don't need there that much ultimate power, they are going to be much more competitive in road courses and short ovals. And I would even go as far as saying also in speedways, but speedways is only Trenton. So
Yeah. All right. Well, this is getting me really excited about next year because obviously Alberto and I we love this era of oval racing and the fact that there's all these new dimensions that are coming into it as well. I think you're going to find some people who normally wouldn't be all that interested in driving oval racing. I think they'll give it a second look because of the not only the addition of the road courses, but also just the advancements that happen with the Cosworth engine and other things. So, I think it's going to be a really, really exciting year.
well,
And
I would say that that's something that has been happening over the last years.
mhm,
You remember we when we were arranging our entry list for the 74 series, we were going like, oh, it was a series that was not so much well attended in real life. Many races were like 18 cars, 20 cars, something like that, and we were like doubtful about what kind of entry list we were going to have. In the end, we settled for 21 cars, and we were overwhelmed with requests from people to drive this. It was really really lovely to see people getting interested in that. And I would say, I believe, because we have already some years, some history also from the league we were running previously, that you and me have been really surprised and delighted by the fact that many people have been finding out how fun it is to actually do oval racing. It was something previously unknown to them, and they've been enjoying it. And I think we've gained many fans of oval racing over the years. And this trend is, I think, going to continue in 78.
well, Alberto, thanks so much for providing the insights for us today on this, and I'm sure you'll have a lot more insights to share in the forum as we go forward.
Well, thank you too. It's always a pleasure to be here to talk with you
Yeah.
about all these things, and to basically tell all our users, all our drivers, all our friends in the end what we're going to do next year, and keep them excited, because from what we have already published in the forum, I think that people are really excited because this is going to be an amazing year. And you and me know, because we are behind the stage and we know what's going on there. And wow, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, and we have to thank so much the people like David Sabre, who does all those models, like Richard Wilkes, who does wonderful physics and has helped so much and has given me the foundation of this beautiful tire model that we are using now.
Yeah.
And also Richard Coxon and Juha Boss, who are tireless testers. I mean, and probably theirs is one of the most obscure works, because they don't see so much fancy exposition as the 3D modelers or the physics creators do. But man, I mean, you have to commend their job, because they are doing absolutely an incredible task of debugging everything, testing thousands and thousands of lab in all the mods, and it's really beautiful.
All right. Well, that's about all the time we have, but thanks a lot, Alberto, for walking us through some of the particulars of the 78 mod. And we'll be back in here with another podcast shortly, probably to talk about further things we're doing in 2021. But until then, for Alberto, this is Jason White saying so long. And please, wherever you are in the world, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.